Hello, everyone, and welcome to the opening reception of Enrage by Megumi Naganoma. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Megumi, and we'll begin the PowerPoint presentation. So born and raised in South Florida, Megumi Naganoma is an interdisciplinary artist whose own experience and research inspire her work and bring awareness to sexual violence and PTSD. Naganoma dominantly works in fabric, video, and drawing. Her practice responds to current events, stigmas, and societal norms revolving around rape culture. Using these methods, she advocates for rape survivors while keeping various audiences in mind by starting conversations that continue to shed light on something that is often still seen as taboo. Naganoma graduated from Florida State University in December of 2016 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in studio art and a minor in art history. During the summer of 2016, Naganoma interned for Judy Pfaff in Tivoli, New York. This led her to pursue a master's in fine arts and sculpture at the State University of New York at New Paltz, graduating in May of 2019. Currently, Megumi Naganoma resides in Tampa, Florida, and works in higher education at multiple institutions. We'd also like to thank our community sponsor, Interact. Interact is the only provider of domestic violence and sexual assault services in Wake County, North Carolina, saving lives, rebuilding lives, and securing safer futures for individuals and families in our community. Interact materials are available in the gallery at the exhibition for those wishing to connect to their awesome supportive services. So we thank Interact, and we also thank Megumi Naganoma. So help me welcome Megumi. Take it away from there.
Hi, so I'm Megumi. It's nice. Oops, let me connect. Real quick, hi. It was nice to be here. So some of the work my work focuses on rape awareness with that PTSD awareness and in general mental health. Me specifically, I talk about rape awareness, but it also umbrellas sexual violence as a whole. And I'll get into that in a minute. Okay. So I do want to give a trigger warning ahead of time. Like I said, themes of rape and PTSD. So if you need to step out, I am not offended at all. Like, if anything, I support it. You need to take care of yourself. If you feel uncomfortable stepping out and you want to put earphones in or something, that's okay too. I'm not offended. Okay. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So I was raped on April 27th, 2013. I was a freshman at Florida State University. It was the last week before the end of my spring semester. I failed all my finals. So that sucked. I relatively immediately looked for support, and I had some friends and family I confided in immediately. Lucky for me, I was brought up with having some language to understand that certain things were not okay and to seek help. Like, I had enough trust in my family to say, okay, I need to tell them. Also, I wasn't behaving the way I know I'm supposed to behave, or the way that's normal for me at least, right? So I was like, they're gonna notice, because it was, again, the last week of my freshman year, and then I was going home for the summer. There was no way of me hiding my behavior. I knew that I needed to say something, or I was gonna come off as a crazy person, air quotes on that, because it was just so erratic from what my norm is. So with all that, I did have a loss of identity. I've always been a really nocturnal person. That being said, I was literally sleeping all daylight hours and I was awake at night and I was avoiding people. I consider myself an extroverted introvert. So the fact that I wasn't interacting at all, I was becoming a shell of myself. I continued making art, but it wasn't art that I was happy with. It was just me getting by. When I went back to school, I started behaving, and it's a destructive year, right? I started behaving. I wasn't worried about my safety in the way that I know I should have as a base level, right? So I didn't realize that I was developing PTSD. So PTSD is not an immediate thing. It takes time to develop. So I got the diagnosis about a year later. So a little bit after the first year anniversary of what happened to me. I do want to communicate to the person who attacked me was somebody I thought was my friend, right? Oftentimes it's not a stranger. We have that narrative in our heads. That's not, I mean, it happens, but it's not the common. So for those of you who don't know, what is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder? It was coined in the 1980s because of the Vietnam War, there were a lot of veterans that came back, and then they were showing signs and symptoms. What we now know as PTSD, it was depression, anxiety, flashbacks. Other common symptoms are paranoia, fits of rage, just emotional distress. So you'll be like, okay, for 15 minutes, and then you're like really sad for like 10, and then you're angry again for like it'll switch. It can be dormant for a while, and then you can have triggers. And that could be sound, smells. Those are really big ones, actually, sounds and smells. But let's say there's like a specific car, that could be a trigger, right? And that can lead to anxiety, panic episode, etc. So the thing about PTSD, excuse me, is that it's not always from going through something, somebody's witnessing something, right? If somebody sees their parents go through a really bad divorce, that can be traumatic for a child, right? If you're in a car accident, that can cause PTSD. The thing is about relating to sexual violence. Sexual violence is the leading cause of PTSD in this country. It is actually not combat soldiers. I have a slide coming up later about that. But it is through veterans that we learned more about it and able to understand the symptoms. And only in recent years have we talked more and more about rape and sexual violence, so we have bigger numbers now. And that's only with people that have reported, right? So it's still a big gray area as far as numbers go. Oh, at the bottom, excuse me. Finding treatment within the first 2 years is vital in PTSD to find a higher chance of being cured, because PTSD can be cured. But if it's prolonged, you have a harder chance of it being cured, but you can still find treatment to maintain and be okay. In my case, I still have PTSD, even though I sought help almost immediately, right? It just is what it is for me. I live with it for the most part. Okay, I have my bad days. The last year I've had a harder time with it. That being said, if this is me looking for help immediately, right, what could have happened had I not? So if you're going through it, or you know someone that goes through it, I do recommend looking for help, especially if you find a specialist. The thing with PTSD is that because the symptoms are things like depression and anxiety, those can be their own diagnosis. You suffer from anxiety, you suffer from depression. It is the collection of these symptoms with events that you might be holding on to that create PTSD. That's how it kind of like, it's a melting pot of all these different things. So sometimes if you know something's happened, it's best to look up for a specialist because they can tell you and what kind of therapy. And there's a number of therapies now. So I'm not going to get into that, but such thing as like prolonged therapy, exposure therapy, etc. can help. Those are some of the causes of, and I put etc. because it just depends on the person. It's the whole nature versus nurture, right? You can have the best household, but then like you were born with a higher chance something, if your family went through something, it can't be passed on. So you have a higher chance of something of having those symptoms, and then an event happens, you have a higher chance of developing PTSD because of it. So it's a very complex thing. That image is actually from a study in Yale. So that is brain chemistry. It's a scan, and you just see kind of like how some of those areas flare up differently. Somebody with stress, that PTSD. So me as an artist, how I work, I consider myself a conceptual artist. I'm also a mixed media artist. For me, my ideas come first and then the materials. It happens to be that I keep going back to fabric, but I'm not strictly a fabric artist, like a fiber artist. I'll fixate. That's my thing. That's one thing about me that I'm working on. I get an idea and then I'm like, I have to do it, right? I'm getting better about, I can't do that because I don't know how to do this thing at all and it's dangerous, right? Like having to find my limits. But, and you guys will see it, that kimono in there, I didn't know how to make kimonos. And then I was like, I'll do this. I have 300 hours to spare. So that's how that was born. But for me, I work in metaphors a lot. So everything has a why, or I try for everything to have a why, right? Colors, specific flowers, certain imagery, how it's being presented, what are the historic connections to it? So like, not just the art history, but the history tied to something. The cones, for example, they're very quilt-like. Quilts were used traditionally for storytelling, right? And families would pass on their stories. I'm trying to pass down other survivor stories, and we'll get into that more later. And then hand sewing is my big one. As far as if I'm creating a fiber piece, I can't think of a fiber piece I've created that is machine sewn. And that's, yeah, I know how to machine sew, I just don't. For me, hand sewing, there's no shortcuts. You have to take the time with each stitch. That's what recovery is for mental health. You have to take the time and do the work. You don't get that shortcut. You might think you took a shortcut. It's probably gonna come back and bite you in the butt later. It's just the reality of it. You kind of have to deal with it to get better. So flowers are for picking, and how to install. That's the kimono that's hanging in there. This is how it was viewed the first time. I want you to notice that the front is very, very simple. That was super intentional. The reason was when I was like 20, 21, I went to a show for Rape Awareness Week. Mind you, April is Rape Awareness Month. We have a month. But I went to a show that was supposed to be a rape awareness show. The way the idea of the show, I think, was great. The execution was not great. And that is because the artists that were presenting, it was a collection, I think it was like 20 artists. They made work in their pain, in their anger, super valid emotions. What was happening, this is pre-Me Too movement, right? Pre these conversations. This topic in general in art is still relatively new, let alone the world, as far as like talking about it. But these artists created their pieces, and some of them were really graphic, some of them had sound, some of them were video, some of them were video and sound. So me, newly traumatized, walking through the show, you know, thinking, oh, Rape Awareness show, like this is my community, great, like I'm gonna feel comfortable. I'm walking through, triggered. For me too, I internalize a lot of, if I have an episode, it can be external. That's usually if it's in a safe space. Otherwise, it's very internal. And it's, you know, it's a masking technique. Like I'm masking to like just get through things. The survival technique. So I'm being triggered and I'm with a bunch of people because it was a class thing. And then I was like, just trying to get through the pieces. And I was like, not okay. One girl ran out, she was sobbing. So I was like, but that's before I jumped into this topic. I was kind of like tiptoeing into it at that point. And that moment, I hated that moment, but it was still important because I was like, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to keep going in this direction, I cannot traumatize the people I'm trying to represent. These artists made their art in pain and in anger, and it makes sense. But because the topic wasn't talked about, they did not consider how it was being presented, nor did the people installing it, right? The curators and stuff, because they had a theme, this important topic, and they're trying to give the artist the space, but they forgot about the audience. It's not just people that never been through it, right? There's a lot of people who've been through it. We all know more than one person's been through it. That's the reality of it. It's like 1 in 5 women have definitely been sexually assaulted, and it's 1 in every, I think it's like 33 men, but it's estimated it's actually 1 in every 20 men because the numbers are so, like, and men report so much less, right? That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people that have been through that stuff. So when you're creating these shows and you're not thinking about that, you're accidentally hurting the same community you're trying to represent. And as somebody, as part of that community, I want to see that work. I want to see this platform that's been created for these artists, right? So when I made this piece, it's graphic. The back is very graphic. So I was like, if I'm gonna make this graphic art, I need to make sure that the viewers can come from the front, the drawings are on the side. There's so many warning labels. I was really adamant about that. Imagery of sexual violence, depictions of rape. Past this point, you will see like graphic imagery, right? So the drawings kind of were a little more subtle, not in color. So that, again, warning labels before that, but you already know it's coming. And then we get to the back, right? Everything's there, but it's a way of censoring myself without having my art be censored, right? / keeping survivors in mind. And then this is it from the back. I did not include any of the imagery up close for this presentation. It's in the gallery. I feel like I don't need to make giant images of it for you guys. Like I said, it is graphic. It measures 7 feet across, like the actual kimono, by like 12.5 in length. And it was about 300 hours of hand sewing. That's not including the actual illustrations and stuff. This piece actually focused on high profile cases in the media that the way the headlines were created, it was putting a lot of blame on the victims, and not enough on the predators. I started doing research for this in 2015. It was not intended to be a political piece. It became very political really fast because the election for 2016 was not how I thought it was going to turn out, honestly, because I was like, I'm already doing this research. I'm not going to change my plan. Like, I think it'll be okay. And then the world happened the way it did. And then I was like, okay, I guess it's political now. That wasn't the intention. That being said, up there, there's like, we do have Donald Trump, we have Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Cosby, Jameis Winston. There's a depiction of my own attack, Dr. Luke / Kesha case, and Brock Turner. And there's another one that shows like a child in a guy's arms. The name was more obscured, but the way it was, that one made me so mad when I was doing research because that case was going around and around. It wasn't really giving you his name, which frustrated me, but it was saying like 2-year-old seduced young man. And I was like, that's impossible. So I was like, I'm including this. Like, this is absolutely not okay. So I was calling out the media and how I was presenting the victims, and I wanted to show the alleged perpetrators the way that that headline should have been. No 2-year-old is gonna do anything, right? So creating this work. When I finished this, I was burnt out for 6 months at the very least, where I was not making art and I felt super sick. I actually got physically sick. I have health stuff, and then that made it worse. Right, PTSD also can be very physical. Not only can your body re-experience the physicality of everything, but because there's so much stress, it can literally cause things like back pain, nausea, headaches, migraines, you name it. So those were added things that I was dealing with apart from my own health stuff. So trauma, art, and advocacy. Like I said, triggers can be sounds, sense, vocabulary, right? Like certain phrases, like can kind of like live in our head sometimes. So that's there. Disassociating is common. That's, you know, when like time's just kind of passing and you're just there, letting it happen. Sometimes it's no big deal, but sometimes it's just your brain just trying to get you through the day. Anxiety, depression, loss of sleep, those are common ones. And there's a bunch of other stuff, right? Appetites being changed, etc. So those were things that were happening post making the kimono. Like literally one night, a lamp exploded over the kimono. There's glass everywhere, and I'm there crying with tweezers, pulling the glass out because I thought it was destroyed. And then I ended up crying on the kimono with glass around me. And I'm like, oh, later, right? That was not good self-care. It's like I should have gone away from the glass, honestly, right? So you have to take care of yourself through these processes, despite really wanting to make it, because you can re-traumatize yourself, and that's just an awful feeling. So listening to yourself is priority. If you feel that you're getting anxious, pause. It doesn't mean like stop, right? You decide that part if you stop or not, but pause. Go get a snack, go for a walk, take a shower. I don't know. I don't care. Just take care of yourself. And find ways to ground yourself. These are some of the things that work for me. I have a bunch of playlists that are just go-to music that I just really like. Like I have some that I think of with like music I relate to with traveling, if that's what I want to think about, right? To get myself there. Music where I think about like, I'm a Y2K kid, so like that time, right? Essential oils, because scent is a good one. So I love lavender. So the smell of lavender can remind me, it's like, you're not actually thinking of that stuff. You're here right now, right? And those little things can help. Books. I like a lot of books with imagery. So I have like some books that are just nice to have that little, or poems and stuff like that. Familiar movies or shows. Like, I'm sure there's at least one person in here that watches The Office on repeat. It's a common show, right? But it's the familiarity in those shows and movies that we find comfort, that because we know it's going to happen, right? So we know there's no surprise, and that can be a big comforting thing. So knowing those shows and movies, that's a good one. Like my phone, I have so many dog and panda videos saved, like literally, and I love them, and they do help me, right? Comforting foods, that's a good one, because taste is another sense, right? So you can pull yourself back with taste. Like for a while, I used to keep ginger candies on me. It helps with nausea. Ginger's a sharp taste, so it kind of brings me back. Go-to people, so people you can call that you know are going to pick up or text or whatever. And some people are like, just text me a wall, it's fine. You can just let it out, right? And doodling, which is what created the doodle books that you see over there. There are about 17 of them, I think. I'm working on 17 right now. I semi-lost track. I've moved a bunch since I started the series. But it started as a way to ground myself. When my brain would get kind of loud, I just start doodling. Even if I was having a good day, because I know my brain can kind of be like, you're okay, like this is a good day. Maybe I don't have PTSD. Did this actually happen? And like, no, it happened. And then it's just like this little plummet. Like it's a constant thing. Sometimes even though I feel okay, I'll still be doodling to just kind of like remind myself. It's like, this feeling's good. Take care of yourself though. It doesn't mean you stop taking care of yourself, right? So some of them are really comical. That's me. I usually wear a messy hair bun. So that's me over there. And that's my baggage, right? But then some are a little darker and related to like the actual events of what happened to me, memories, things like that, words. And it started as a coping mechanism to keep myself grounded because when I was in grad school, I moved to New York. I was very alone. I did make friends eventually and all that, but I was very alone. So it was really easy for my brain to creep up. So it was like imposter syndrome. And then it wasn't like I just had people I needed to turn to be like, hey, I'm having like anxiety right now, right? Couldn't do that. So I was like, I need a way to focus in class. But let my professors know I'm doodling, I'm listening from doodling. And it kind of expanded from there. So now, excuse me, there's like 17 of them. Number 17 is happening, like I said. Moving into listen to them. Those are the cones. So this was the first one. This was originally going to just be its own piece. This is 19. I was 19 when I was sexually assaulted. So for me, I think of like tree rings. That was like a stopping point for me. I consider April 27th, 2013. I celebrate it like a birthday now because that day could have gone way different. I thought I was gonna die, right? Because I was so self-destructive, I could have died, right? It has made me stronger. It has made me more vulnerable, more empathetic. There are things to celebrate while I can still mourn the previous version of myself. I used to love taking long walks at night. I don't anymore, right? Kind of sucks because I love that. But at 19, there was a stopping point. Things changed for me. And the bursting cotton at top, that felt really important. If you haven't experienced anxiety, I'm so jealous of you. But for those of you that are anxious, a lot of times we carry it here in the back of our neck, right? Our head down to the shoulders, or it's kind of here like a ball on our throats. And sometimes it feels really internalized and heavy, and sometimes it feels like exploding out. For me, when it's anxiety related more to PTSD, it's this exploding feeling that I'm like, nobody sees this, but I feel this explosion happening from my chest. So I wanted to incorporate that feeling. There are the 19 layers, one for each year of my life. I included little things, and there's small details where it's like, which one's that one? 1, 2, 3, 4. Like 4, that was like a period of my, this is the purple one, like H4. I felt so much because I was like skating a lot and I'm really bad at it. I always had knee scrapes, right? It's like little things in there that I remember are included. But they're little stacks because us as individuals, like no one knows me better than me. And I'm still learning stuff about myself all the time, right? That's true for each of you. I can tell somebody, my favorite person in the world, as much as I want about me, they still don't know. They only get to know a fraction, right? So that's why this one's like this. It's different than the other ones. This, like I said, this is going to be just the singular cone. It grew. This cone stands 5'5". I'm 5'5". That's how tall I was when I was attacked. Full-grown adult, right? But it was intentional. I wanted it to be representation. I consider this is a self-portrait, right? I consider this a self-portrait. So I thought about all the people that already talked to me at that point about their attacks. Some were strangers, some were friends, some were friends of friends, coworkers. I don't have a degree in therapy, or I'm not a counselor or anything like that. I have immersed myself in this topic a lot, desensitized myself a lot, gender studies, things like that. So I consider myself well informed, right? But with that, people feel comfortable talking to me about their stories. And like, I welcome it. Like for me, it was life-changing to have somebody tell me their story, because for me, it was this big aha moment. I'm not alone. Like, oh my God, there's other people that feel this way. And then, oh my God, there's other people that feel this way. Like the both happened at the same exact time. It was important. So I was thinking, how the community, at this point, this is like a year after Me Too started, the community seems smaller than it really is. And the reality is that we're all part of this community, because if you care about someone that's been through it, like, welcome, you're a part of it, because your role can help that person heal, right? And unfortunately, we never know if we're gonna go through it. Like, there is no age limit, there's no cap, right? There's no rules behind this. That's why it's a crime. Like, it's really bad. So this is the initial sketches. I had to consider, who is this for? Like, is this piece for me? And I was like, what started out like for me to like think things through about myself and my own healing. But then I was thinking, well, beyond that, I want this to be for the people I know that are healing. And I want this to be for people that are part of the community, to know that there's a lot of us. And I want this to be for people that aren't part of the community, or consider themselves part of the community, because they know people. And there may come a day they go through it, or someone they really care about will open up to them about this topic, right? So specifics when planning, absolutely no audio. I'd recently been to a show where somebody included audio. There were no warning labels. At that point, I keep grounding myself, but I was like, this could be really bad. No, right? Because I was giving out all these opinions, and people are like, "Why we put little like recordings inside and you into the cones?" And I'm like, it's still audio, like that can still trigger something. If you can lean away, like damage is done. I figured with booklets, you can at least close them up real quick, right? And like make yourself not see the words. Like, you don't have to read. If you know you see little books, I can ignore the books and keep going. Versus the audios, it's like little whispers. I feel like that could be really anxiety inducing. So there was that. So that's the option to look away part 2. Considering structural integrity, I needed them to be bottom heavy. So I had to figure out how to construct that. So there was like a little bit of woodworking and welding involved, and then so much cotton, because I wanted them to look soft and inviting, and something pointy, right? Like stalagmites, like in caves. That's not welcoming. Like, it's beautiful, but it's not welcoming. So I needed this form to be inviting. So I kept up with the fabrics, because I considered different materials and all that stuff, like straight away from that. And then communication with survivors, super important. This piece could not have happened had the survivors that I asked to participate not said yes. I was not gonna, because I know their stories. I wasn't gonna just be like, okay, I know this, I'm gonna go and make it now. Like, that didn't feel right. I wanted their consent to create these cones that represent them. So going forward, that's the tallest one. That one's about 6'3", I want to say 6'3". So the participating survivors, anonymity was important. I told them, please write your stories for me so I know what all happened, so I can include that as, or be inspired by that for the cone. But I will not put your written letter. I won't just put your entire story out like that. I won't put any specific characteristics that like people can like look at this and be like, oh, that's you. Like, I'm not going to do that to you. I'm not going to put you on blast like that. So there's that anonymity. If you notice the booklets on the cones, they're all handwritten by me, because I didn't even want their handwriting to potentially be recognizable, right? I wanted to give them the space to tell their stories without feeling like they've been exposed to the world, right? If they want to tell everybody, that's great, but I wasn't going to do that. That's not my place. So I was kind of like a funnel, right? All this information, and this is what's coming out. Yes, and the cones themselves are narrations. So this person wears like a lot of flannel, for example, really woodsy person. Some of these are fabrics that I went and located, but they look a lot like the clothes they would wear. I wanted it to be this representation of this person. Excuse me. Who's represented, and listen to them. Women, men, non-binary people, LGBTQ+, people of various cultures, without various religions, various economic statuses, childhood survivors, survivors of multiple attacks, survivors who were attacked by a partner, a family member, a friend, stranger, right, and anything in between. I wanted the pool of people that were in this to be as solid a representation of what the realities are as possible, right? It's not, we have this horrible stereotype that it's going to be the drunk college girl. It's not, right? It's, again, there's no rule or boundary to it. Like when you have a predator, they're gonna do what they want with whomever they want. It doesn't matter if I'm wearing like a dress down to my ankles or I'm in a bathing suit, right? It doesn't matter if I'm wearing no makeup, a ton of makeup, like it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter how I identify, what religion I practice, what culture I have. And I felt like that was important because we have this idea in our head. That's partially also why I wanted the cones to be representational with colors and fabrics and not with faces or body types or anything that's that specific to an individual. I needed it to be this like even playing field because you're a survivor, you're a survivor, right? If you've been victimized, you've been victimized. There's no one cookie cutter rule to it. So these are some details. So to semi-inform you on it, this person was 13, turned to cigarettes, right? Went into drugs for a little bit. Beautiful, vibrant person. Came out of that pretty alone at the beginning. Now it's a really strong person, beautiful artist. Over here, person I love very much. Her friend attacked her, and when she ran away, she got bit by fire ants. If you've been bit by one, that hurts. You've been bit by a bunch, it really hurts, right? The ant bites cause an infection. She had to go to the doctor. Doctor put her on steroids. Steroids kind of make your immune system drop a little bit, so your body's trying to recover. In her case, she realized that she had contracted an STD because of her attack. The steroids actually made her body flare up faster, which was in a crappy way a blessing in disguise. So that was a really big part, and that's a reality of these attacks. Like there can be STDs involved, right? So if it's happened to you, especially if it's recent, you haven't been checked, get checked just in case. It's important. I believe the next image is the booklets. So a heads up just in case there's words there. So these are two of the booklets. So if you notice, they're fragmented sentences. They're not full sentences. I've just grabbed inserts of parts of the dialogue as they were written out. So if I had like a sentence that was like, I don't know, 16 words, I grabbed 4 and just a couple. The actual entries were anywhere from like a page to like 8 pages. And I would still only grab a couple of words here and there. Just enough to feed somebody the story, right? At the same time, for anybody that's a survivor, that they read this, they understand it. They don't need to read a whole story to it. And it's still preserving each person's story. It's keeping it anonymous. And I'm not going to read this out loud. You can read. I'm not going to say it out loud. Unnecessary. So Listen to Them has 21 cones. They all stand again at the height of the survivor at the time of the attack. You saw the one that was like 6'3". That man was attacked at 6'3", right? There's some shorter ones, and the shorter ones are people that were attacked as children, right? So I would look at the average height of a child, like a little boy at age 8, right, and find the average height. So that's how I figured out those heights. Some of the cones have multiple points on them, and it goes kind of 2 ways. Either they're attacked more than once, so like maybe like 2, or they're attacked for multiple years, right? And it's instead of including like 365 points per year, that's a lot. Right? So I just consolidated to years. I will go back real quick. This one has, if I recall, because I didn't bring this one. I didn't bring any of the ones that represent children, but this one I believe was 6 points, so it's 6 years of being assaulted, right? And it opens up, it flowers up the cone, because I just sew, right? I try to have the height in mind. So these are extended up, they stand at the height. This one just kind of flowered open. So the booklet's right in the center. This person's probably the strongest person I know. The talking of child survivors, like them sharing their stories, it's sometimes harder, it's more traumatic as a child. I mean, it is more traumatic as a child, it's the reality of it. It's not like one trauma's like worth more than a different trauma or whatever. There's no value competition there, but it's the reality that childhood trauma is deeply embedded in the person, so that they share their story, such a graphic story. I think was a really strong bonding experience for me and this person, but it's also really important as far as them letting the story go because they wanted to speak to other child survivors. And this is a piece that I hope to keep expanding. I have them, like I said, I've moved a lot recently, but I have some materials prepped so I can start again. So again, who is the audience? I said who I wanted my audience to be able to listen to them. So if you're trying to create this kind of art, and by this kind of art, I don't necessarily mean rape awareness, though it definitely applies here, but with any topic that's difficult, taboo, whatever language you want to use for it, who are you advocating for and are you helping them? Right? Like I said, I went to that show and there were people that were really, they made their art in anger and in pain, and it makes sense, but they were accidentally hurting multiple people from the community. You can't, there's no way to like keep everybody safe. It's really hard. You just never know what's going to make somebody be triggered or anxious, you know, but to minimize it, right? So like sound, like I said, that's a big one. I'm not including sound. I'm going to take that away, right? Even the thought of it. So when creating something like this, a lot of people want to go for shock value, right? Shock value can be good. It's often tempting with topics that are hard because you just want the person to be like, oh my God, like, right? And they're supposed to remember it because it's that oh my God moment. But is it effective? Like, will they remember it after the fact or are they going to brush it off, right? Sometimes somebody gets uncomfortable and they're like, I don't know if I can think about it and like walk away. Is it ethical? Like, is what you're creating, like, there's no true censorship in art. It's a good thing, but is it ethical in that if you think about what the person potentially could have gone through, could be going through, are you doing a good thing and still making somebody look at that, right? Like put yourself in somebody else's shoes for a second type thing. Is someone getting hurt, right? What I basically just said. Something can be shocking, but so if you're going for shock, are you handling it carefully? And is it with empathy and consideration, right? My kimono piece, it's graphic. It is really graphic. It was originally going to be more graphic and I toned it down. But I needed to make sure that if I'm going to create this, it has to be considering who's going to walk into that room. What have they been through? Because I don't know everybody's story, but I know it's a common thing. So whether you're talking about this specific thing, displaced people, veteran art, like hate crime, whatever the topic is, like how are you creating, how are you presenting it? Because it is like art is education. We want to teach people, right? Like, and regardless if you consider yourself an educator or not, when you're making art, you're creating information for someone to take in. So what are you trying to let somebody know? What are you communicating? So actually right there, knowledge, art is education, right? My goal, and when will I stop this art? Like I said, art is education. I am trying to expand people's empathy, right? So, like I said, we all know multiple survivors. I'm trying to reduce rape culture. Someone makes a rape joke. I mean, I'm pissed off, like I'm really pissed off, right? But it's like, that's not funny. Or like, I won't laugh, walk away, cold shoulder for a little bit. Like if I can't get it verbally out, like that's not funny, right? But I'm not just gonna like I make sure to not like just laugh along, like haha, like it's funny, like it's not funny, right? And there's other ways to reduce rape culture, such as and if you're feeling safe, someone catcalls, right? Why'd you do that? Just something as simple as that can change things so much. Only do things if you feel safe, right? Like don't put yourself in danger. My goal is also to validate survivors. So many times I've talked to a survivor and then they're like, you're the first person I met talking about this. And I'm like, oh no, I'm glad that we made a connection, but I don't want to be the first person someone meets because that means that they haven't had that, right? And though I'm honored to have opened that world to somebody to know there's a community, I don't want to be the door for it, right? I just want to be someone that helps the healing, helps the growth. But the validation is also for those especially struggling, right? Create the art that I do. I want someone that's having a hard time to be reminded that's like, there are some of us out there trying to like fight for it. And then destigmatize the conversation. This right now what we're talking about, my goal and hopes of the whole like artist knowledge thing is that maybe in the future, like if someone comes up to you with this topic, you already know a little bit, like the playlists, essential oils, whatever, right? It's those little nuggets of information that can really, really change somebody's day, and that they can really change the trajectory of how things go for them, right? Destigmatizing the conversation, having this knowledge, it also makes people want to be more informed is my goal, right? It's the ultimate goal, because regardless of your political affiliation, like rape is bad. And I'm gonna assume we all agree with that, you're here especially. But the reality is that there are state laws, right? And so each election that comes up, sometimes there's state laws, and I'll say like in certain states, and I believe it's Missouri. If I'm calling it Missouri, I'm so sorry and I'm wrong. But it's like, it has to show evidence of a struggle, right? Like, or you have to be a woman in struggle. That cuts a ton of people out, right? Like a ton. So it's like things like that, where it's like behind this information, it's wanting to be more informed and like create change little by little. And who knows, sometimes even just supporting one person, you might be supporting the next person that will help get things changed later, even more. And then I'll stop when rape is eradicated. I am asked all the time, well, how long do you plan on doing this? I'm like, I guess when it stops. Like, what do you mean, right? I've had people tell me, well, you keep making this art, you're probably hurting yourself, or you should change career choices or research topics. There's all this stuff happening with environmental art or just mental health in general. And I'm like, rape is mental health. Like, and it touches a ton of different stuff, because through PTSD, I've learned about depression, or I've learned about anxiety, paranoia. If it's untreated, it can develop other issues in mental health, right? I've learned about treatment. I've just learned about empathy in general. So someone's going through something, like something else that's traumatic. Like, for example, I'm luckily physically healthy enough, I haven't had to go through something like a major surgery or treatment like chemo or something. But if someone comes up to me and they're like, I've been through this, I know that it's not like, okay, well, you'll get through it. That's not gonna help, right? But through empathy, I might have better vocabulary or the room to sit and listen to them. And that can be really important for that person. So this topic, I'll stop when things stop happening, right? I think that's a good boundary. So I don't think I'm stopping anytime soon, but we'll see. And we are survivors. You've heard me use the word survivors like a million times in this lecture. It's because not everybody makes it. That is the reality. I've explained the symptom of depression, right? Or the condition of depression, and it has symptoms. With that comes suicidal thoughts, reckless behavior sometimes, and actual suicide, unfortunately. And the reality is that this traumatic event, a lot of people think of it as not as bad as like other kinds of traumas. It's not the case. It literally changes the brain, right? So the predators, they choose to make victims, right? Survivors choose to keep fighting, right? And that is not to devalue someone that struggled with that fight and didn't make it, but it is to commend the strength of someone that's going to keep going. So I use the word survivors because we didn't choose to be victims, but we choose to keep going. So some of my resources for this lecture, and then that's my doodle, that's me. Any questions? Yes.
Do you mind opening up about your friend, like with the red flags that you missed? I've fallen into, I don't know, like toxic relationship after toxic relationship, and I had to like take a break.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes like if you miss red flag behavior in one person, you'll keep going for people with this red flag, so you're observant of it. So like, you know, the fact that it was somebody you knew, would you mind sharing more about that?
Sure. So hindsight's 2020. Now I see the red flags. I definitely noticed a few things during that time in the friendship, but the reality is that for me, when someone's my friend, I mean it, they're my friend. So I saw it as someone that was working on themselves to be better, to try and like get through the crappy stuff that happened to him as a child and all that stuff. So I never took it as I'm in danger. I took it as, oh, they're hurting and they're working on themselves. Because there wasn't enough of any behavior that ever put me in danger before, right? It was just like expressing frustration or whatever. But we all get frustrated sometimes. So I didn't take it any kind of way. But regardless of like, there could be like 100 red flags on giant poles and posts and lights everywhere. It's not your fault. It's not the person's fault, right? The reality is that predators just kind of they're predators. It's literally what it is. They do a good job at seeing who's vulnerable, right? And they can be very manipulative. Someone that's manipulative can adapt, right? And come off as really charismatic. That's why there's a lot of like abuse in relationships. And I'm talking about emotional, mental, right? Then physical and sexual, right? Because it's not usually just immediately physical abuse. It happens, but it's not immediate. Usually it's like subtle. They're going to start with the love bombing. They're going to start being charming, funny, right? Great dates, great presents, whatever happens, right? And then when you've opened up to that person, you trust them and you've let yourself be vulnerable, that's where the subtle things happen. Like, well, I don't like your hair that way, wear it differently. Little things like that to take control. So it's so subtle. It's that thing, once you're out, you can see it. In my case, like I said, I saw some of those flags, but I really thought it was this person just working on themselves. So when it happened, I was so mad at myself for so long. Especially, I did martial arts for 13 years. I know how to fight. This person was in the military. They knew how to fight. And I knew I was in danger. There were like weapons involved and everything. So I was like, okay, I have to survive. Like I remember that happening. I was like, I have to survive. And then because I knew how to fight, because I started flags, I was so angry at myself. And I had to like let myself be angry at myself for a little bit, get through that feeling, and then redirect to be mad at him. And I'm still mad at him, right? Like I like the art that I make, but I'd rather be a shitty artist than have PTSD, like, right? But the red flags, if you're in a place where you see it and you've been through it, I would just take that as, okay, like, am I going to take the chance of being hurt? But regardless if something happens, it's not your fault. It never is the person's fault. They're manipulators. That's the reality of it. But I do suggest finding people you trust, because sometimes a good friend will tell you, this is not okay. And sometimes that's all it takes for somebody to just like take a step back. Anyone else?
This might be a dumb question, but so after what happened, would you say you changed into a different person? So if so, you ever feel like after changing into that different person, you wanted or felt the need to go back to who you were before what happened?
Yes and no. I'm definitely stronger. I got lucky that was my outcome. But I was angry. I was so angry. And that led to like the self-destructive behaviors that led to me being careless. And then I was like, in my carelessness, I was doing like, I guess, cool stuff. Right. But in that, I was like, this could be bad. Like, how do I make this, like, how do I use this energy to do something else? Also, I'm tired of feeling crappy when I'm not in the middle of this like high of feeling good. Right. Because it was just a decision. It was just like hanging out with like people. Like I used to be a fire performer, fun fact. So then I was doing like more and more of that and like doing more difficult tricks, and that it's literally fire. Like, right. So it's like, okay, like I don't want to burn my face off. Like literally, right? Like literally. So I am a different version of myself. I have more empathy, like I said. I think that's a good thing. Sometimes I miss the old version of me because I was more carefree. I wasn't careless, but I was carefree. And I was more trusting. I still consider myself trusting, but now there's more of like, I want to wait for a second and watch what's happening and let myself open up. So I celebrate the old version of me. I think there's a lot of good stuff about her. Like I'm still the old me. It's just evolved into this new version. But this new version, like she couldn't talk in front of these people before. Like I wouldn't be able to do this like some years ago, right? Or understand somebody else's pain. Like I won't fully understand anybody else's pain ever, but I can empathize with it and be an important support system. And I think that's more important than the old version of me. I think it's okay to mourn the old versions, but I think it's okay to celebrate the new ones too, and celebrate the old ones at the same time. Anyone else? Yes.
I love your work. I think it's really beautiful.
Thank
For sharing, the story and your heart and your soul with us. Can you talk a little bit about, how long it takes you to make one of the pieces?
Too long.
I admire you, so that's crazy. It's amazing. So around about.
So it really depends. The kimono was like 300 hours of sewing. Because the fabric was just so big, I'd have to do like little practice stitches to hold things in place and then restitch to actually hold it in place. And some stuff I had to like, oh my God, I forgot the word, reinforce. Plus the flowers and all that stuff, because the flowers were hand sewn too and things like that. So that was like 300 hours. That's not including the imagery on it. The cones, I would take breaks because I had other stuff happening and there were other pieces happening during that time, but the cones themselves took 2 years. And the 19, that first one, that one, because that was the first one, so I was taking my time with it, happened in a span of 2.5 months. So I want to say, like hour-wise, that one maybe was like 40 hours. Because there was also like sometimes I made mistakes, so I'd undo all the stitches and then go back in and do it again. And I also am with yarn, so yarn it's not for sewing. But I was like, I really want like thick stitches, so like having to find needles and make it work into the fabric that was not cooperating. But I was like, again, I get fixated, so I was like, you're gonna come together. Like I refuse for you to fall apart. So, I'm gonna say each cone is 20 to 50 hours depending. Yes.
I noticed and your work is beautiful.
Thank you.
And very powerful.
Thank you.
I noticed on the cones that the stitching that you're talking about, but also there were some places where the filling is coming out. Is that intentional that you have some places where it's kind of coming apart and the stuff is coming out?
Yeah, so some of them have bigger openings, those are super intentional, and some of them have these little ones, and I knew it was gonna happen along the way. And I let them be. The way I see it is the realities of you kind of have to put yourself back together when you're going through this stuff. But there's gonna be little spots that are gonna like take longer to like heal. And that's just kind of how I saw it, as like this narrative as I went along with the cones. Yes.
Are there some artists that you're inspired by, like whether it's feelings or content that inform your work?
I really like Yayoi Kusama, her use of color and her repetitiveness. Her work focuses with her mental health, right? I definitely use my art for my own mental health, but I try to expand with the bigger picture. But she's really repetitive, and I saw that was like really therapeutic. And I was already doing the repetitiveness, but I felt where I was like, oh, like here's this like really important artist doing this, and I felt really good about that. It's just like it just felt good to know that's like this is working for people and this does help. Other artists, I just forgot his name. Oh my God, I'm so bad at this. Oh my God, there's another, he does Japanese printmaking art. In his case, he's a gay artist. And he does some pieces talking about the AIDS epidemic, and he does it using Edo period, like sexual block style prints, but with modern imagery. So there's like condoms and ice cream and like people in swimsuits and stuff. I need to remember his name. Oh my God. But those are the two that I probably have looked at the most for that kind of work. Thank you guys.
So please enjoy the rest of the refreshments and enjoy the rest of the show. Megumi will be inside the gallery if you guys want to talk to her individually, and please enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you for coming to the opening gallery talk.